It is the month of May in North India. Summer heat is at its peak. The humidity is high, but the gentle hills and valleys of the sub-Himalaya are green nonetheless. Surface water is restricted to only a few streams in the undisturbed and deeply forested ravines and in the larger rivers. While the rest of North India reels under near drought conditions, this region has a climate of its own and is neither part of the plains of North India nor a part of the Himalaya. The Shivaliks are a young and modest range that in most places run alongside the foothills of the Himalaya. The forests, in turn, generally comprise of sal and teak, and other evergreen and deciduous broadleaf forest trees. The water drainage of the Himalaya cuts through the Shivaliks in a lot of places, and so the water table here is seasonally recharged by the lesser submontane streams emerging from the Himalaya and, to a lesser extent, by the larger Himalayan rivers. The Terai is a belt of rich soil and forest types, characterized by artesian bore wells that rise to the surface after a period of travel under the dry Bhabar or Shivalik foothill country. A lot of the flat land here is utilized for agriculture, and the region produces some of the finest rice, wheat, and sugarcane in Asia. The bird life of the Terai and the Shivalik region is extremely rich and varied, like few other places in the Indian subcontinent. A sighting of the Indian pied hornbill is a rare but not unusual occurrence here, as is this pair of grey-headed mynas, and in May, despite the hardships of heat and water scarcity, a majority of the bird population sets about the task of choosing nest sites, collecting material, and building nests. The male purple sunbird, with his iridescent blue plumage, and the dull olive-colored female build their nest in the form of a pendulous pouch of rubbish and fiber. With nest building complete, the female sunbird sits and incubates the eggs, while a nearby colony of Baya weaver birds is busy preparing their neat little nests. While the locations of these nests may be varied, and the nests themselves diverse in character, there is one bird that stands out as one of the most beautiful and unique birds to be found in India. The paradise flycatcher, the very apotheosis of Asian bird life, is by far the most fairy-like bird to be found in India. Although the paradise flycatcher is not uncommon, anybody who sees one cannot but wonder at the beauty of the male bird's streaming tail feathers. Terpsiphone paradisi, as it is known in Latin, is a shy bird with a weakness for thick forests and shady groves alike. It is particularly fond of orchards of mango and lychee, which are common along the Shivaliks and what is known as the Terai belt. In the scorching summer sun of a day in the month of May, temperatures can rise to nearly 50 degrees Celsius in the sunshine. All forest creatures retire to the shade or seek the solace of water holes and shady ravines, including this magpie robin and an orange-headed ground thrush. The flycatcher pair are busy at work, lending the last semblance of order to their compact nest cup. This consists largely of small twigs, fibers, cobwebs, and spiders' egg bags. The nest is generally situated at a height of 2 to 15 meters from the ground, in the elbow of a twig or over the fork of a branch. The male, with his blue-black head and streaming white tail feathers, can be easily differentiated from the female, with her diminutive size and grey and rust-colored body. The flycatcher pair appear to be satisfied with their nidification or nest-building work. They have shared in the labor up to this point, although the female's role has been predominant. Now, the female starts spending all her time sitting over the nest, preparing to lay her eggs. These are generally laid at the rate of 1 or 2 a day over the course of a few days until the clutch of 3 or 4, and rarely 5 eggs, is complete. The eggs are a pale creamy pink in color and are speckled and blotched with reddish-brown marks. The female and male take turns in the incubation of the eggs, which continues for a large part of the day, sitting overnight as well. This goes on through the warmest of the summer for a period of nearly 16 days. Then, one fine day, the young ones hatch and the real work begins for the paradise flycatcher pair. They make numerous trips back and forth to the nest, bringing back freshly caught winged prey in the form of moths, butterflies, beetles, grasshoppers, and dragonflies. The appetite of the young chicks is apparently insatiable, and the parents persist in keeping their stomachs full. Sometimes they get over-enthusiastic and feed them prey that is much too large for the chicks to take in, leave alone to digest. The father tries once, and not being able to get the insect into the yawning gape, pulls the prey out and tries stuffing it in again, this time too without luck. Finally, he changes gapes and tries again, only to meet with failure yet again. Then, on the last attempt, he succeeds in stuffing it down the second gape from his brood of 3. The chicks are at their most vulnerable as they grow and create a minor ruckus each time a parent approaches the nest with food. They vie with each other for the insect morsels that are brought to them. What should alarm the parents is the presence of this monitor lizard below their nesting tree. But they continue, oblivious of the predator's movements. The monitor, meanwhile, patiently investigates the leafy forest floor, assiduously turning over leaves as it ambles along in its typically labored fashion. If the monitor were to find out about the flycatcher nest, it would be only too happy to empty it of its contents while the parents are away hunting for food. This is just what happened in an adjacent nest of flycatchers. The monitor lizard made its way up to the nest in the lychee tree, ate up the chicks, and left behind a small meal for the red ants. It is not only the paradise flycatchers that are breeding at this time of year. A pair of white eyes has also set up camp within the same orchard. These diminutive birds with a characteristic white ring around the eye have built their little hammock-shaped nest between the fork of a branch and are busy feeding their chicks. Unmindful of the busy paradise flycatchers going about their task as well. There are other avian species that are also busy with their yearly nesting activities, readying their broods for the bounty brought by the monsoon rains to give them a good start in life. A black drongo incubates its clutch of eggs, and soon the entire drongo family will be out in the meadows, hawking insects from prominent perches. In open spaces and grassy flatlands, one comes across the rather common red-wattled lapwing. The nesting bird patiently sits in the open sun, incubating its rather exposed clutch of speckled and well-camouflaged eggs, which can range from 1 to 4 in number. Entirely arboreal or tree-dwelling in nature, this large green barbet family prefers groves of leafy trees such as mahua and ficus, both for their figs and sylvan cover. Nesting takes place in the cavity of a tree trunk, and when grown up, the chicks emerge from their natural wooden enclosure and observe the world from nearby branches, taking in the fresh sights and sounds. Meanwhile, a young barbet tries out his beak for the first time, and not realizing its strength, the coppersmith or the crimson-breasted barbet is a smaller cousin of the green barbet and nests in similar holes within tree trunks. Bee-eaters nest in the sandy banks of riverbeds and hurriedly complete their nesting so as to be done before the monsoons hit. The blue-tailed bee-eater is not easy to differentiate from the blue-cheeked bee-eater, but to the trained eye, the two are quite different in look, calls, and habits. They often nest together in colonies along suitable sandbanks. Gregarious by nature and accomplished flyers, bee-eaters often undertake some tricky aerobatic maneuvers as they hunt for bees, flies, and other winged prey. There are other species that choose to nest within hollows of sandbanks, such as the white-breasted kingfisher, another accomplished flyer, and the bank miner, which gets its name from its predilection for nesting in sandbanks. A hoopoe pair is nesting in the cavity of another forest tree. The parents keep themselves extremely busy with frequent visits to the nest, carrying food for their rapidly growing brood within. The hoopoe is no less an accomplished flyer than bee-eaters or kingfishers. Its perfect flight, with each pied feather in place, is testimony to its skills. The crest is fanned out for but a few seconds while landing and taking off. At all other times, it is thrown back over the head. The long-tailed nightjar is seldom seen. Nocturnal in nature, nightjars emerge from the shadows of the forest floor in the evenings and retire just before daybreak. Red-vented bulbuls are equally at home in the forest as in a city garden. Here, the female tends to her newly hatched chick minutes after it emerged from its egg. Another summer and monsoon breeder is the Indian peafowl. Here, a peahen delicately turns the eggs in her clutch in an effort to uniformly incubate them. She has moistened her belly so as to keep the eggs humid and warm at the same time, even as she pants in the unrelenting summer sun. And where there are birds nesting and weak hatchlings, there will be predators. Barely had this warbler chick made its way out into the big bad world that it ended up as a meal for an alert shikra nearby. Shikras are adaptive birds of prey and feel equally at home in thick shivalik forests as they do close to urban centers. The rainfall has been heavy as the monsoons have hit the Shivaliks. Bird activity has heightened as most bird nesting has reached the hatchling stage and the parents are busy carrying food for their broods with an abundance of insect life as a result of the incessant monsoon rains. Leeches, butterflies, ladybirds, dragonflies, and damselflies. They are all intrinsic members of the web of life in the Shivaliks. A passing butterfly falls prey to a spider's web and soon resigns to its fate. Stream beds that have remained dormant since the last rains now gush with rainwater. Ferns festoon the tree trunks. Lichens, mosses, and colorful fungi grow aplenty. Water lilies grow in little forest pools. On some days, it seems like the rains in the Shivaliks will never stop. Rainwater gushes through the rocks and green cover, even carving out new channels in its rapid and forceful movement. A variety of animal life makes its presence felt on the forest floor. A slug steadily makes its way through the freshly fallen leaf litter, seeking out its post-monsoon bounty. Meanwhile, a tortoise ambles towards a forest rivulet, plonks into the water, and clambers across to the other side to make its way to better feeding grounds in a meadow beyond. In the rocky cliffs and outcrops of the Shivaliks, the mist shrouds a group of Goral, the wild mountain goat of the Himalaya, as they playfully gambol and spar with each other. Shy and retiring, Goral are not easy to sight, and being prized game animals, they are also subject to heavy poaching by local inhabitants, despite a stringent governmental ban on any sort of hunting. In the thickly forested hill slopes of the Shivaliks, these langur monkeys are not averse to feeding even in heavy rain, their thick coats protecting them from the downpour. The forest is rife with bird activity. A blue-throated barbet and a party of chestnut-bellied nuthatches busily scan the upper stories of forest trees, the former in search of ficus figs, the latter in ambush of insects, taking shelter under the bark. The shrill call of the male quail reverberates through the forest, while black bulbuls move in bands through the hill forests. The paradise pair who lost their chicks is meanwhile busily rebuilding a fresh nest and will make one more attempt at breeding this season, having lost the entire fruit of their labor, true to Rudyard Kipling's If. They are rebuilding everything from scratch and will breed once more this season. One of the flycatcher pairs, meanwhile, has succeeded in bringing up their young. They will soon be ready to leave their nest. The 4 chicks barely fit in any longer. While the parents have worn themselves thin with the exertion of feeding them, the chicks have thrived and are preparing to take on the world. During the course of a few days of constant rainfall, they attempt to make their first forays out of the nest. One by one, they hop out and sit on adjacent branches. The parents nervously edge them on. They constantly guide the chicks and stay by their side, fearing for their young lives. One fine day, the young flycatchers too will fly free like their parents and pair up to breed in a nearby mango orchard or in the underbrush over a bubbly Shivalik brook.